The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
What do they call a person who finishes at the bottom of his or her medical school class? They call that person doctor. What do you call a 20-19 win over a losing team playing a third-string quarterback? You call that a win, and it's win number 9. And for the first time since Joe Gibbs was in the last year of his first go-round in 1992, this team is 9-5. They count them up at the end. They don't ask you how you got there. And with one more win, they're pretty much assured of being in the playoffs. With 2 more wins, they get 11 victories for the first time since the 1991 season. So, yes, there's a lot to be concerned about from yesterday, but we're in December. The key is to win games. The key is to get closer to the playoffs, and Washington is closer to being there. So had they lost that game, had New Orleans converted on the 2-point conversion, totally different story. But there is concern about a defense that has had this problem all year long. And this was Joe Witt last Thursday. Coordinators speak every Thursday. And in Joe Witt addressing the state of the team, he stated a problem which showed up yesterday as they were up 14-0 at the half and were outscored 19-6 in the second half.
We're close, but we're not consistent enough, and I got to do a better job of getting them consistent and making sure that in winning moments that we're ready to go. We started a lot of games really well. One thing that popped out to me was I think we're third in the league in the first quarter of allowing points. We don't give up points, but in the fourth quarter, we're last in the league. We give up too many points in the fourth quarter. And so how do I shore that up? Is it the calls? Is it the situations? What is it that's allowing that to happen? And that's one area that we really looked at. We looked at the run game as well, okay? Once again, calls first, okay? Technique second, utilization of players third. And so those are areas that we really stressed. And then ball production. We have to produce the ball some one way or another. We changed some drills this week, and hopefully that we will be able to produce the ball the way that we should.
Well, they did win the turnover battle. They did get a Mikey Sanderstill interception, so there was that. But at the end, they could not keep the Saints from scoring, as the fourth quarter was a problem again, as 12 of their 19 points were scored in the fourth quarter. And look, the key is to win games, and we see upsets all the time in the NFL. So you can't turn up your nose at a win, especially when it's win number 9 and you're closing in on the playoffs. But the problems that Joe Witt described there were still evident yesterday. Look, offensively, the numbers are staggering. They held the ball for nearly 41 minutes. Saints didn't have the ball at all in the first half. Jake Haener was terrible. In fact, Washington was lucky Spencer Rattler didn't start that game because he nearly brought them back. But in the first half, they were dominant. And in the second half, they had problems running the football, but they still wind up, and this is a great stat, 9 of 17 on third down, and they held the Saints to 3 for 11. You know, you'd think with stats like that, you're holding the ball 2/3 of the game, you're stoning them on third down, you're converting third downs yourself, and you still have it come down to that final 2-point conversion try. Now, I was really surprised that the Saints went for it there. The old adage that you go for 2 on the road and you go for 1 when you're at home. But also on top of that, sometimes you'll see a team score in that situation, but maybe there's 30 seconds left on the clock. Well, if you don't convert the 2-point conversion, you still have an outside chance. It's a small chance, but you still leave yourself a chance to recover the onside kick. In this case, the interim coach now of the Saints, Darren Rizzi, who's done a really good job since taking over, he said didn't even hesitate on going for 2 in that situation.
I really think 2 major factors. One, the momentum. We had gained all the momentum back. I felt like if we kick the extra point and we go to overtime, now who knows who gets the ball? Jaden Daniels is a phenomenal player. Kool-Aid had gotten banged up, AK had gotten banged up, MVS had gotten banged up, and I'm just kind of looking and saying, this is our chance to win the game. And so it was probably, number 1, a momentum thing, and then probably number 2, more of a personnel where we were in the game. And if you told me at halftime that, hey, the last play of the game, you're going to be throwing the ball to win the game, and so, with the way the first half went, so I just felt like at that point, listen, I know there's the old adage about, go kick the extra point at home and go for 2 on the road and all that. We would have went for 2 in the Rams game too, just the way the game's played out. Now, if we had been scoring and the score was 45-45, it might have been or 45-44, we kicked the extra point, maybe a different scenario. But just with where we were, I just felt like it was the right call.
Well, there was one thing that helped Washington, and maybe it's not that big a deal, but maybe it is. They had 2 timeouts left at that point. So they watched the Saints line up, and then Dan Quinn called the timeout. And he said there's a couple of reasons for that. One, they're coming out with their best play in that situation. So they've already showed you what they're going to do with how they line up on the field. So now they got to go to their second best play when they line up again. So that may have been a factor as well. And plus, you take the momentum out a little bit. They're all juiced up after scoring the touchdown there, and now they got the opportunity to go for 2, so you slow them down. And Frankie Louvu, who was spectacular again yesterday. Again, this is why Carolina is a horrible organization. How they didn't hang on to this guy, I don't know. But he's been the best defensive player all year for Washington. And he said, we were expecting what they got on that final attempt on the 2-point conversion.
Man, they did a sprint out pass. And, I thought they were going to do something else. But then when they did a sprint out pass, it was already predictable what they were going to do because everybody's kind of going there other than the play before where, it's kind of open and getting more flexible with the calls and whatnot. But, it was, Noah did a good job on the play, man. He was just did his job, stayed on his man, and finished all the way through, and, we came out with the dub.
What did you think they were going to do?
Man, I thought they were going to pass kind of did the same thing they did the play before, the tight end. But once they motioned the tight end over, we knew it was something else, We did a sprint out pass, and I'm happy they did that, what I mean? Because it's, Noah was kind of there, and it was all towards that pylon. So coming up to win, that was good.
Yeah, Noah Igbenogany. Oh boy, I think I got that. Igbenogany broke up the 2-point conversion attempt there, and Washington holds on to win 20-19. They come into this game as 7.5-point favorites. They're already facing a backup quarterback in Jake Haener, and he's as bad as he can possibly be. His quarterback rating, by the way, in the first half was a 16.1. The worst you can do, this goes back to the 2003 season when Steve Spurrier had pretty much checked out. They played a late season game against Dallas at FedEx Field, and Tim Hasselbeck threw 4 interceptions and had a quarterback rating of 0.0. that was, and I think he only had like 40 yards passing or 50 yards passing, something like that. So he had 41 yards passing and an interception in the first half and a quarterback rating of 16.1. So, how do you judge this if you're the Commanders? Well, you judge it by a win. That's the main thing. But also for a team that Dan Quinn keeps talking about taking the next step, taking the next step. Was this really a step forward for his team?
In a game of missed opportunities, penalties and misplays, those can get frustrating, and lots to clean up onto those, and we will. But that's a little bit like December and January football where it does get hard. And so to go all the way down to the end, to the last play, you've heard me talk about the fight of the group, and that's one of the things I really admire about our team. We've been in a lot of close games, and so we're getting battle-hardened. It's not always, comfortable to be in those spots, but being on the sideline right there at the end to go for it, that's why we do it. And so to come up with a win here on the road, that's a big deal, and take our next step.
Yeah, battle-hardened, okay, maybe. But I saw some real problems in the second half, particularly running the football. Now, they were without their starting center, that he was not able to go, and so they had to play a backup there. There were a couple of bad holding calls. Chase Young was obviously fired up to play this game. He had a couple of sacks. But I thought, Brian Robinson, who averaged only 3.1 yards a carry, they did not run the ball well, and I thought that was going to be a key to winning this game. They did not run it well, and that hurt them particularly in the second half. So you can argue whether this is a step forward beyond the win. The win is the big thing. But it's record-wise for an organization that has had absolutely no success. I mean, these are these are clearly the kind of games that they lose. I mean, even if they put forth a gallant effort, like New Orleans did, they would lose this game. These were the kind of games that they would lose. So, Jaden Daniels is a rookie. He played college football where he didn't lose a hell of a lot of games, and he doesn't really understand the history of this team. But it was one of those, hey, congratulations, you're on a team that's going to have the first winning record since 2016.
I mean, I like winning. I know a lot of people like to win. I mean, nobody wants to lose, but I'll say I like winning, and, we just keep building from here.
Yeah, who doesn't like winning? So they are 3.5-point underdogs against Philadelphia. The reality is they win one of the last three. They're in the playoffs. I don't know how much further up they can go if they win two of the three, because the Green Bay win last night is going to be difficult for them to overcome. Their game behind the Packers. But if they win two of the last three, there might be a chance that they wouldn't have to go to either Philadelphia or Detroit, although Detroit's really banged up. They lost two more secondary guys yesterday. I think they also lost a defensive lineman. And it's possible they'll do a little bit of a slide down the end. They got some tough games coming up. So, could be a game that it's not even in Detroit. They could go, someplace else. There's a lot of possibilities. Seattle losing last night probably doesn't help Washington. They might have to go play a really hot Rams team on the road. There's a lot of things that are in play here. But got to realize this. Last time they were 9-5. I looked this up. December 13th, 1992. And they had beaten the Cowboys to get to that 9-5 mark. The following week, they lost to Philadelphia. So it comes down to the final game of the season, and it's against the Raiders, quarterbacked by Jay Schrader, who had been traded by Joe Gibbs a few years earlier for Jim Lachey, which proved to be a great trade for Washington. They went on to win the Super Bowl. Mark Rippon got sacked only 7 times all year. It was a really great deal. But, Schrader had become a pretty good quarterback and a guy with a big arm, and that team could be dangerous with him. They go to RFK. It's a Saturday game. So it's one of those, we want to put this on national TV. Jay Schrader and the Raiders back in Washington. And Schrader's either sick or hurt, doesn't play that game. Vince Evans, who was 40 years old, who bounced from team to team. I believe he had played in the World Football League, which had folded in 1975. So this is, 17 years later, and he's still playing quarterback. And the Raiders won the game. And Washington had to wait until the following day for Green Bay to beat Detroit, so they back into the playoffs. They get to go on the road. They got to play the Minnesota Vikings, quarterbacked by Sean Salisbury, who later gained much greater fame on ESPN, now doing radio in Houston. But they managed to win that game in Minnesota, and they went to San Francisco. And to this day, there's an argument whether it was Brian Mitchell's fault or Mark Rippon's fault, but there was a handoff at the end of the game, which if it had gone properly to Brian Mitchell, he would have walked into the end zone, and they would have had a real chance to win that game. But the handoff was fumbled. Mitchell blames Rippon. Rippon blames Mitchell, but that ended Camelot pretty much. And then they exited the playoffs. The 49ers went on to lose to the Cowboys in the NFC Championship game. But if they make that play, it's possible they're playing in Dallas for the NFC Championship the following week. Gibbs retired in March. Richie Pettibone took over. The team dropped to 4-12, and pretty much has wandered through the desert since. I mean, you kind of look at that Minnesota playoff game as really the high water mark for the start of an era that was just miserable, including, of course, the Dan Snyder years. But you had the aging team that was being turned over for the salary cap, the retirement of the Hogs, all that stuff, and it started that season. So this is at 9-5. Kind of the start maybe of something big with a young quarterback who's got great promise to be a franchise guy for a long time, whereas the 9-5 of 1992 was kind of the match that ignited the end of Camelot, of all that. So that's a little history lesson for you. Speaking of history, coming up in the 10 o'clock hour, I want to talk about what has to be the most devastating loss in the history of the franchise regular season. I'm not talking about when they got their doors blown off by the Raiders in the Super Bowl or losing the NFC Championship game to the Giants 17-0. I'm talking about a game that was in the bag. They were up by 13 points on a 66-yard John Riggins touchdown run, and Roger Staubach, with less than 4 minutes to go, put 2 touchdowns on the board, and the Cowboys won 35-34. Cowboys won the division. Washington at 10-6 went home, and it was partly because of a point differential where it looked like the St. Louis Cardinals just laid down against the Bears and lost 42-6. Bears went to the playoffs as a wild card team on point differential. Washington went home, and in many ways, and I'll get to this, that could really have been what started the Joe Gibbs era. And had they won that game, maybe there's no Joe Gibbs, and the rest is history. It's all crazy stuff, and we'll talk about it coming up in the 10 o'clock hour. But Dan Quinn held his tongue yesterday on what seems to be just a foolish mistake by the officials, which was non-reviewable. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
You know that great NFL Films clip where Marv Levy goes, "You over-officious jerk." I think Sean Hochuley's crew was a bit over-officious yesterday. There were 9 penalties, some of them legit, and some of them just to try and protect Jaden Daniels, who took 8 sacks, not all of it the fault of the offensive line. But those were really killers in many situations. In fact, there was a pass which they threw to Brown, which would have set up a really short field goal, got called back on holding, which set up what was a, I believe, 54-yard attempt by Greg Joseph, who, by the way, is the 6th kicker since the end of last season. Some of it circumstance, some of it just failure on the part of the other kickers, injuries, whatnot. And Joseph was the next man up yesterday. He did kick 2 field goals, but he also missed one, which could have been devastating for the team. There was also a play at the end of the game. Now, they get the ball, the Saints do, in position to, either tie the game or take the lead. And they go down the field after the miss. There's less than 2 minutes to go. He missed with 1:55 to go. Spencer Rattler, you got to give him credit for that. Good thing he didn't start the game because he was tough for Washington to deal with yesterday. Made some big plays, really big plays. And I guess that he will remain the starting quarterback for a while for them. But he connected with tight end Foster Moreau for 7 yards to convert a 4th and 3 from the Washington 8. Saints were out of timeouts, and they managed to spike the ball with 3 seconds to go. But inexplicably, there were at least several seconds which should have ticked off the clock and did not because the clock was stopped. Is it possible that Rattler might not have been even able to get up to the line in time to spike the ball without that? Washington escaped, so Dan Quinn was in a pretty good mood, but was asked about that strange clock stoppage after the game.
I don't, and I am absolutely taking the high road right now, Dave, about that. I saw a quick video of that, and so I will wait from the response from New York, but those 3 seconds are critical, man. Let's just say that, and we're on to Philadelphia. I don't know how to answer other than I saw that the replay in the game. I was frustrated. Why? And so, but in the moment, you don't get to ask, and you don't get usually the feedback when it's that type of intensity. But hey, I do have to give New Orleans their credit on this. A lot of times when there's that many plays offensively for us in the first half, we've seen games where it just goes quick the other way. And so to show the kind of fight that they had, I told that to Joe Woods, the defensive coordinator. I said, Joe, your guys really fought. When you have a time of possession that's, almost 40 minutes, and you're in the game to go at the end, like that doesn't usually go your way. And so I wanted to, give Joe his due there for his team. Really battled for it.
Well, okay, let me give you the pool report. A reporter was sent in to talk to Sean Hochuley, head of the crew, about what happened there. And the question was, at the end of the game, it was the third to last play. The Saints completed a pass short of the goal line, and the clock kept running, and it appeared that the clock stopped at 9 seconds. I was wondering if you had an explanation for the stoppage. Hockley said the covering official mistakenly stopped the clock in that situation. The clock should not have been stopped. Question, was there any consideration of reviewing the stoppage? Was there anything that you could have done after the fact? Hockley, no, that's not a situation that's reviewable. Were you aware of that mistake? Hockley, that's all I have for you, Luke. The covering official mistakenly stopped the clock at 9 seconds. It's not reviewable. So, this could have been sent to New York. This could have been, a lot of complaining that would have been done. There would have been nothing they could do about it if they wound up losing that game on the 2-point conversion, but they did not, and they survived. Now, moving forward, again, they only seemingly have to win one of the last three. I'm sure they're going to be favored against Atlanta. We'll see what Atlanta does tonight. Their playoff chances could be just about shot if they lose. I don't know if they'd be officially eliminated, but they'd be in deep trouble if they lose tonight at Las Vegas. So they could be actually coming here with the backup quarterback, Michael Penix Jr. We'll see if Kirk Cousins remains the starter. He had a terrible game last week. He may, if he does it again tonight, there could be a quarterback change. But they'll be favored in that, and they should be favored in the final against Dallas. The problem is they're running out of weapons, and Noah Brown is likely going to be out for the season. I would expect that Austin Eckler is unlikely to come back. He's had a second concussion. The earliest he could come back is against Dallas. And now you got Zach Ertz out with a concussion as well. So that's putting a lot of pressure on Terry McLaurin, who was great yesterday. That first touchdown was spectacular, where they basically played backyard football. You see him, waving in the end zone for Jaden to hit him, and he threw it high, and he almost collided with Brian Robinson, but managed to come down with the ball. That was great. And then the second touchdown that Terry McLaurin caught, this was not the best game that Jaden Daniels played, but he is so accurate. He is absolutely accurate on this drive to set up the touchdown. He threw a beautiful third down pass to Brown. And then Zach Ertz made a great catch to set up the touchdown, but it was a great, perfectly thrown ball by Jaden Daniels where nobody could catch it, but McLaurin put it right in the right spot, and he caught the touchdown. Now, they had a few other plays that they could have put the game out of reach. There were 3 bombs that he threw to McLaurin. I thought 2 of them were catchable by McLaurin. They would have been great catches, but I thought 2 of them were catchable. The first one was really a shame because he was so wide open running down the sidelines, and he just overthrew him. So McLaurin, as always, very cooperative with the media after the game, talking about his connection with Jaden in this one.
We missed a few, myself included. We just got to find a better way of finishing. And, I'm just looking forward to get back on the field with him and clean up on the things that we miss. It's the type of players him and I are. We just, we expect to make the ones we make, and then the ones that we don't, we're, frustrated, just try to get back to work and get connected. But, him and I have definitely grown as individuals and teammates, and not just him, but our entire skill group. So, early we definitely did a great job of just connecting, and just at the end we got to find a way to just make one of those plays. So, him and I are going to get back to the drawing board on the field this week and looking forward to the next opportunity.
One of the plays you made was that first touchdown catch. Can you just take us through that play and the play you made on the ball specifically?
Yeah, it was just scramble drill, honestly. I ran a quick out route on the opposite side of the field, and, I saw him scrambling to the left, and I was like, there's an open part in the middle of the end zone, so I just tried to run to it. We preach all the time, the ball finds energy, and I threw my hand up, and, he threw a missile. So, I trust myself in those contested catches situations, and he put it right there. So, for us to come out there, and that was a tough drive because we had a few, we had a few steps forward and a few steps back, but to come off the field with 7 in the end, that's what it's about.
Nothing really came easy for you guys today, but you got out of here with the win.
Yeah.
How do you build on that for next week with a big game coming up?
Yeah, I think, we expect these game after game to finish the season. If you want to have a chance to get in the playoffs, they're going to come down to 4 quarters, and we're not expecting any of these to be easy. We didn't expect today to be easy at all. I feel like we can help ourselves by just limiting the penalties, making the tough plays. We were moving the ball, I felt like, really well. It's just when you have a penalty there, a missed opportunity there, that's going to halt some drives and get you a little stagnant. But, we still found a way to win, which that's what's most important. But going into a tough week with Philly coming in town, we got to be able to be clicking on all cylinders for 4 quarters, and they're going to make plays too. We know that, but just being able to find a way to come out on the other side, making those plays is what's going to help us going into this next week.
Terry McLaurin, who's been through a dozen quarterbacks, finally has one, and no surprise, having a career year. He caught 7 passes for 73 yards yesterday, the 2 touchdowns. He's got 11 touchdowns on the year. His career high, I think, was 7. So he's blown past that with 3 games to go, and certainly has, in my mind, had a Pro Bowl season. I know there's a lot of great receivers, but what he means to this team, that's going to be big down the stretch. Because as I say, without Eckler, without Zach Ertz, and with Noah Brown gone for the season, they're really depleted. Now, De'Ami Brown played well yesterday, and they're relying on him, and he made a play which I thought should have cemented the game, but this was typical of what happened yesterday with the 9 penalties. There was a 23-yard pass to De'Ami Brown to the New Orleans 10-yard line, and that's a chip shot field goal from there, and that puts you up 10 points, and there's a little more than 2 minutes left on the clock. I thought they totally mismanaged things from there, threw passes when they should have been running, and wound up with that 54-yard field goal attempt by Joseph, which was wide right. So that's what made it such a nail-biter at the end. But that pass from Daniels to De'Ami Brown to set that up at the 10-yard line, that was a great play. But Nick Allegretti got called for holding. He's had a great year. But they had problems with the New Orleans pass rush, as evidenced by the 8 sacks that Daniel took. Then they, instead of running, they throw an incomplete pass, which again stops the clock. You're not forcing New Orleans to burn timeouts there. They still had 1 left. And then, just under 2 minutes to go, Joseph misses the 54-yard field goal, and then we got the drama at the end of the game. So I thought, Dan Quinn deserves some criticism there. He defended what he did. They were making a decision whether they were going to punt or kick the field goal, depending on where the spot was and depending on, what the range was for Joseph. But, Joseph wasn't even supposed to kick. Zane Gonzalez, as of Wednesday, I believe, maybe even Saturday or maybe Friday, I guess, is when Quinn last talked to the media before the game. Zane Gonzalez was going to be the kicker. And then we find out just the day before that they've got Joseph up from the practice squad. Remember, Joseph was the guy who kicked for the Giants earlier this year when they lost their kicker in the opening game. And this is the state of kicking. As a matter of fact, I'll get to this. I got time for this now. Let me do this because I've been holding on to this. Hold on one second. Brandon Aubrey yesterday attempted a 70-yard field goal. It was at the end of the half, so, wasn't going to be any harm if he missed, and he did. But he attempted a 70-yard field goal for the Dallas Cowboys. And that is a spot which people around football are looking at and saying, that's doable. We've had a 66-yard field goal kick. Justin Tucker did it a couple years ago to beat the Lions at the gun. That was an indoor attempt yesterday in Dallas. Oh no, that was was it Carolina? Yes. Let's see. The attempt that he had yesterday. I know Dallas won. Where'd Dallas play yesterday? I think it was Carolina, right? Yeah, they won at Carolina. So that was an outdoor attempt. But there's going to be 30-14. They won. We're going to have a 70-yard field goal, according to what this story has from SI. I got this from last week. And some of the things they point out, for the first 70 years of football, the entire league produced 2 successful attempts from 60-yard plus. 2. Brandon Aubrey, one young athlete who happens to kick field goals, has made 2 of those in 2024 alone. He converted 2 others easily that penalties negated. One would have tied the NFL record of 66 by Justin Tucker. Did that September 26, 2021. Wow, it's 3 years ago. How about that? Aubrey isn't someone who could have played professional soccer. He did. He won the 2013 Men's Soccer National Championship at Notre Dame, went to Toronto FC in the first round of the MLS draft, played for 3 pro teams at various levels, and then switched to football. And Tom Brady has now called him the Steph Curry of kicking because of his range, and it didn't seem insane yesterday on an outdoor field that he would attempt a 70-yarder. And it just goes to show you what has happened with the evolution of kicking in this story. In 1972, NFL officials narrowed the distance between each hash mark to 18.5 feet. Goalposts still rose from the goal line then, leading to oddities such as a 9-yard field goal. Yeah, I've said this many times before, but the 63-yard field goal by Tom Dempsey in 1970 was kicked from his own 37. Because the goalposts were up against the goal line. They've since obviously changed that. In 1973, kickers made 543 field goals, accounting for 23% of the scoring league wide. The next year, they accounted for 8%. So they made some adjustments. Tucker's struggles wouldn't be so obvious. He's struggling this year, if not for the evolution that he powered with his Hall of Fame caliber right leg. 4 of his 6 misses this season through 12 weeks came from attempts of 50 yards or longer, which would not have been a big deal until recently. Yeah, I mentioned this when we're talking about Mark Mosley a week or so ago. Mosley, the year he won the MVP and made 23 consecutive field goals, as the Redskins won the Super Bowl. It's the only kicker ever to win the MVP, probably will be the only kicker to win the MVP. They didn't attempt a 50-yarder. They played 10 games that year. He didn't attempt a 50-yarder. In week 1 of the season, NFL kickers sailed 23 attempts of 50 yards or more through the uprights. 21 of those attempts went through. 5 separate kickers made 2 apiece. Through 2 weeks, kickers were 35 of 39 from 50-plus. Think about that. Think about what a 50-yarder used to be. Like, okay, that's sort of a Hail Mary for kicking. Now, in the first 2 weeks, kickers 35 of 39. In 2006, NFL kickers made 40 field goals over 50 yards that entire season while connecting at a comparably putrid 47.1%. So you had first 2 weeks of this season, 35 for 39. The entire 2006, only 40 field goals made over 50 yards, and more than half of those were missed. Several of the longest conversions in league history are from earlier eras. A 63-yarder from Tom Dempsey in 70. The longest field goal ever kicked, and I guess there's some film of this. I haven't seen it, but his name was Ovi Johansson, who kicked for Abilene Christian, 1976, made a 69-yarder, pretty much had no career. Went to the Philadelphia Eagles in 1977. He was 1 for 4 and 1 for 3 between 30 and 39 yards. So he made only 1 field goal in his entire NFL career, yet in college, Abilene Christian, 1976, he kicked a 69-yarder. What's truly new about this season for NFL kickers isn't that the Cowboys considered a 71-yard Aubrey attempt after the league record tying 66-yard kick was taken off the scoreboard for delay of game. That was week 1 against Cleveland. Way back in 2008, Lane Kiffin, I remember this, sent Sebastian Janikowski out for a 76-yard prayer. Janikowski tried, but his kick fell nearly 20 yards short of the uprights, leading to mockery. In fact, that's when Al Davis fired him, I think. I think that's when he had enough of Lane Kiffin trying a 76-yard field goal. So, as we go through this story, it's becoming more and more apparent that the evolution of the game is moving towards the possibility of a 70-yarder. For decades, most teams trotted out oversized offensive linemen to snap the ball to holders who were typically not holders. Certainly few, if any, understood the nuances and the science of the gig. The snappers in question had to be large out of necessity, in part because league rules allowed defensive linemen to push centers or push them through immediately after snaps for field goal attempts. Remember, we had a kick that was taken off the board yesterday because of an illegal move towards the center, which is now protected. So that's got a lot to do with this. Snap is now perfect. There are the punters work all day on the hold. Used to be the quarterback would do it. They didn't spend much time on it. Defenders on block units were forced to position their helmets and their bodies outside of snappers on attempts. Kickers joined defenseless players in 2011, and long snappers were added in 2013. And so now, you're looking at these snappers. They weigh like 240 pounds because they can be protected. And then also they say the introduction of the K-ball has had something to do with this. K-balls are essentially more broken in than typical footballs. K-balls came under scrutiny in the 90s when teams would doctor them with tactics like running them through a dryer. In 1999, in an attempt to cut down on the tomfoolery, the league mandated K-balls be kept in sealed bags and not open until the game started. In 2008, the NFL began allowing each team to designate a preparer of K-balls on game day. And then they talk about the fields, the more artificial turf fields, the grass maintenance, the dome stadiums, all those things have added up to what we had yesterday, a legitimate shot at a 70-yard field goal by Brandon Aubrey, which was missed, but that doesn't mean that's the last time they're going to attempt it. It would give – the other thing, and this is why it would have to be at the end of a half or at the end of a game, because it gives the ball to the opposition at the other 40-yard line, making a 58-yard attempt the other way right after an instantly missed kick. So what they're saying is if you miss a 70-yarder, you can put the offense right back on the field and have them attempt a 58-yarder. So let's say it's a tie game or it's a 1-point game or whatever. Let's say it's a tie game, okay? So it's a tie game. You come down to the end. You attempt a 70-yarder. If you miss, doesn't matter if there's only 1 second left on the clock. The other team can come out on the field and instantly try a 58-yarder, which in this day and age is totally makeable. So, there's ideas, crazy ideas. You've heard like the 4-point shot in basketball. Here's one. The NFL could add a second set of uprights, a shorter and skinnier version placed inside the larger ones. Field goals sailed between the skinny posts would be worth an additional point. Longer conversions could be added for additional points, too. I kind of like that. I kind of like that you would have the option of having the second set of uprights, because they have the technology to do this, a second set of uprights rises through the goalposts. And if you want to attempt a 4-point field goal, you tell the officials, okay, I want the skinny posts. They can raise those up, and you can get 4 instead of 3. It's intriguing, and it's the way the game's going. And, you see more and more. Like yesterday, when attempting, it was in the dome, I understand that. But years ago, you wouldn't have attempted the 54-yarder in that spot. You would have sent Tress Way out, told him to punt it to the Saints, try and pin him back, and let Spencer Rattler try to drive the field in less than 2 minutes and 1 timeout, try to beat you. They didn't do that. They tried the field goal with a kicker who's, by the way, the 6th kicker they've had this year, signed off the practice squad this week, and the 4th kicker to kick in regular season games for them this year. And they tried it because that's the modern game. That's the way it's played. All right, more react to yesterday's win in New Orleans, plus 45 years ago today, the heartbreak in Dallas. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. So look at it this way. When's the last time you can remember a Washington football team winning a game and you're grumbling about the way that they won? They won 4 games last year. They more than doubled it. Win number 9 yesterday. Oh, yeah, it was ugly. And there are nits to pick. And there are things that they did foolishly, I thought, especially down the stretch. And they nearly lost to a third-string quarterback. 50 years after they were embarrassed on Thanksgiving Day by a rookie in Dallas, they managed to hold off the New Orleans Saints and come away with a victory. At the end of the year, they count them up. They don't ask you for quality wins. They don't separate those out. It's total number of wins, and they're 9-5 for the first time since 1992. They are on track to get 10 wins for the first time since 2012. Excuse me. And they are probably feeling, like, okay, we're in good shape now. We can make the playoffs. Excuse me. Jane Daniels, I'll get some water on this. Jane Daniels, bookending here. First game at LSU at the Dome. Yesterday, back in the Dome.
Life comes full circle. Starting my career here, coming back and playing my first year in the NFL in the Dome. It was nothing but love. It was nothing but love. Obviously, I'm happy that we won. I don't know if a couple people out there, Saints fans, might have some mixed emotions, but I was excited just to be able to play in front of them again.
Yeah, he had 20 people there, and the first game he played for LSU, they lost by 1. They won by 1 yesterday. And, are there things to clean up? Yes. But, this is a team that turned over half the roster. They don't have a lot of depth. They have lost some big weapons, guys who they really counted on earlier in the season. Noah Brown, who was the one that caught the Hail Mary. Austin Eckler, who gave them some big plays throughout the season. He likely, he could be eligible to come back for the Dallas game, but I think likely he's going to be out for the season. And Zach Ertz was lost yesterday. That's a lot of receiving there. And they got a big game from Terry McLaurin yesterday. McLaurin caught 73 yards worth of passes, 7 of them, 2 touchdowns. He's got 11 touchdowns on the season, the best year he's ever had. And, there are things that you look at and they were good. And the stats, I mean, they tell you, the stats don't tell the story. They certainly don't tell the story here. Washington held the ball for nearly 41 minutes. They were 9 of 17 on third downs and held New Orleans to 3 for 11. They had 326 total yards to 245 for the Saints. The first half was a total whitewash. I think New Orleans had 2 first downs in the entire first half. The quarterback they started, Jake Haener, he was terrible. A lot of things are good here, and this is why when Dan Quinn talked about this, his takeaway was, okay, it shouldn't have come down to that, and a 20-19 win is not the greatest thing, but it's not quite as bad as it looked.
We really dug in to say, externally, people are talking down the road, could we get better going into New Orleans? It was going to be our next step, and there's going to be plenty to clean up. But I do know that those moments, these guys have been, into some close battles, and it matters because when you come out on top on the other end of those, there's some confidence gain, there's some, a mental toughness that goes with that. And as a coach early, you'd love it to be all the time in training camp and in early parts of the season, you're almost wanting it to happen. But I'm good with it now. We've got plenty. So I would say I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think he's looking at 9 wins now with 3 games to go. And he's got to say to himself, we set out goals at the beginning of the season, realistic goals. I don't think we expected to be 9-5 at this point. Now, here's the troubling thing. And the offensive line has played really well this year. Tyler Biadasz not playing yesterday certainly helped them. Jaden Daniels did take 8 sacks. Not all the fault of the offensive line, but, and really they weren't sacks like he got smashed, going down. They were kind of like he was sort of wrestled gently to the ground. And I thought the way he ran too, except for the play where he threw his body into the line, picking up the first down, he's protecting himself pretty well. But the 8 sacks, I would say, would be a concern.
I mean, I got to be able to get the ball in my hands and help the O-line out. I mean, I put that on me. It's not all on the O-line. I got to be able to do better back there in the pocket, maneuver in the pocket.
Yeah, he did maneuver in the pocket, and I think some of those sacks were the result of that. Like he got away early in the game by, moving around, dancing around, and picking up first downs. He picked up, a 3rd and 13 on a great scramble play. He can do that, and I think he maybe got a little carried away with doing that. He's right. He's got to get rid of the ball quickly, and he's done a great job with that all season. Yesterday, not so much, and towards the end of the second half, that's what really seemed to hurt them quite a bit. A couple of things from Darren Rizzi. He's the interim coach of the Saints, and he poured his heart out on that. I don't know if this was a part of the game. Was the end of the third quarter. So, Washington is running down the time. There's a field goal attempt, which actually gets off even after the clock had expired. Joseph missed it. He got another opportunity. You saw Rizzi wigging out on the sidelines about that, like, hey, he missed. Yeah, but he missed after the time had expired. So this is how he talked about it after the game and what he felt in the moment where the referee is allowing the kick to go through after time expires, and he wants the play to count because he missed, but because time had expired, he got another opportunity at the other end of the field.
Yeah, it got totally mismanaged. So, they had the diving catch. I didn't agree with it at all, the way it was done. So we had the diving catch, and I had the challenge flag in my hand, and I was talking to the sideline official, and I'm looking at the clock, and we're discussing it on the headset about, hey, the quarter's going to end here. They're going to take the quarter. And I got the challenge flag in my hand. I'm trying to figure out and communicate with up top whether or not we're going to challenge the catch or not. And I'm talking to the official, and I'm saying to him, hey, I might challenge this. Hey, the quarter's over, the quarter's over, the quarter's over, the quarter's over, the quarter's over for about 4 or 5 seconds. They let the play go. He misses the field goal. So whoever's in charge of shutting the play down, they obviously let the play go on. And so the explanation I got is it's a replay assist situation. The play shouldn't have been run because the clocks were at zero. The clocks were at zero. The clocks were definitely at zero. The quarter was over, but the officials missed that, and that's why the play was allowed to go on. That's where my gripe is. The play should not have been allowed to go on. They gave the field goal kicker basically a freebie. They gave him the miss hit. And so I've been coaching kickers for 30 years. You give a guy a warm-up shot, he's got a pretty good shot of making the second one. The success rate goes through the roof when your guy gets a second chance. So that's where my gripe was, is that it was a game management from the officials, operations. I'll let the league handle it, but I hope that everybody else gets held accountable in this league. I hope that the people that mismanaged that get held accountable too, because it was completely mishandled.
Well, I mean, if he makes the kick, Rizzi's wigging out about the fact it happened after the time ran out. And, what does Dan Quinn do if the official says, oh, yeah, time ran out, he gets another shot and he misses? So it goes both ways for each of the coaches. Last thing from Rizzi, and I just want to play this because you hear the emotion in his voice. I mean, he gets an opportunity here to coach a team. Whether he'll get consideration for the job for next year or in the hiring cycle, we'll have to see. But this is a chance, this is a chance at home. This would have been an enormous victory for him. He has beaten bad teams, but now he's got a chance to beat a team that's trying to get to the playoffs, and you can just hear the emotion in his voice after the game.
We needed one more play, and unfortunately we dug too big of a hole there in the first half. We dug a 14-point deficit. So, listen, when I took this job on my first day, I told everybody that we weren't going to lack passion and we weren't going to lack fight. And we weren't going to be boring to watch. And I've never seen a group in there fight harder, be more passionate, and certainly that was an exciting second half of football. I wish that we would have duplicated it for two halves, but at halftime we said, hey, we're going to find out a lot about ourselves and how we're going to respond, and what kind of fight we are, because that's what we've been talking about for these last 5 games in 6 weeks. So. As I just told the group, I have been extremely proud of the way that everybody in the locker room has handled the situation in the last 6 weeks and the last 5 games. And I didn't think I could be any prouder, but I was as proud as I've ever been walking off the field today, because that was just an unbelievable fight to the finish, and we were just one play short.
Yep, one play short. One man's anguish is another man's glee. And Washington comes home 9-5. They're 3.5-point underdogs for Philadelphia next week. We are down to the wire on the RFK bill. There's hopefully going to be a Senate vote before the end of the week. They're supposed to recess on the 20th. And if there is no vote, this could get tabled for a year, and you wonder, what happens down the line. Will they be able to resuscitate it next year and try and get the bill through so that the RFK land can be rezoned, the lease extended, and they can build there? One of the roadblocks has been this from Maryland. There seems to be an understanding from the way I read this that Maryland leaders are looking at this and saying, I think most people, Maryland residents, would like to have the stadium in D.C. They'd like to have it there. But we want to make sure that, we protect our area, plus, the tax dollars, like, there is that if the revenue that would go to Maryland if they were able to build the stadium on the same site. Wes Moore has been pushing for this. He's been showing up at practices and off, the training camp and all that, and they would like to have that revenue. But I think the reality is that most people who live in Maryland would like to see the stadium in the district. They don't want to be schlepping out to Landover and sitting in traffic. So one of the things that they have asked for is they want to make sure that the current stadium, now known as Northwest Stadium, doesn't become a rotting hunk of steel like RFK is now. And what do they do with this? So the latest reported over the weekend is that the Commanders have agreed for the demands of Maryland about the future of the stadium. And in a 2-page non-binding memorandum, it says here in the Post, the team promises to deconstruct Northwest Stadium at its sole expense within 90 days of playing in a new home at RFK or elsewhere, and plan a redevelopment project with the projected economic impact at least equivalent to the stadium it left behind. So what they're saying is we're agreeing to tear this down. The target date to get the new stadium up and running would be 2030. So you're looking at, 5 more seasons playing where they are now at Northwest Stadium. But they'd like to be in the new place, wherever it is. I don't think it's going to be in Virginia. And, I don't think it's going to be on the Maryland land. If they manage to get this through, if there is a vote by the end of the week and they pass the bill and a deal is made between the Josh Harris Group and the District of Columbia to build the stadium, what they're saying is that the Commanders will tear down Northwest Field within 90 days of playing in the new home. That means they would open like sometime September of 2030. So before the end of the year, that stadium would be leveled. Now, there is still the uncertainty whether they're going to have a vote. Wes Moore, in an interview on Friday, said he didn't have a role in the RFK bill negotiations or control over Maryland senators who opposed the bill. I don't have a vote. And when people are saying, can you push it through? I was like, I wish I had that kind of power to push it through. Moore and the Maryland senators continue to say they plan to compete to be the site of the new stadium. They want to have that. But I think Chris Van Hollen and Ben Cardin, I think they would be okay with it going in the district as long as the current ownership agrees to tear down Northwest Stadium, which apparently this is going to happen. They have agreed to everything. It says Maryland leaders demanded that the Commanders ink promises about redeveloping their existing stadium site in Landover and the roughly 200 acres surrounding it, and the team accepted every condition, according to the Post. So there is a deal for this. And, you're talking probably hundreds of millions of dollars, I would think. I don't know. There's also, the Maryland push for funding for the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which collapsed earlier this year. There's that in the picture as well. But this would appear to be one of the last stumbling blocks in this, that Van Hollen and Cardin would not oppose the Senate bill because it only takes one dissenting vote. They took care of the senator from Montana on the logo and the name, not the name, but the logo that they wanted to protect, and that's apparently satisfied them. So there's a lot of, deal-making back and forth, backroom dealing here, but that is a significant step that Maryland said, we got this stadium here. We don't want it to wind up like the carcass of RFK. We need you to tear this down. They said, fine, we agree to that within 90 days of playing in our new place, which is going to be, like September of 2030. We're going to level that. So, keep your fingers crossed. We got a week to do it, but there does seem to be a significant push here and the possibility that they will get everything done in time to have a vote by Friday. If it doesn't happen by Friday, big trouble. As far as, the RFK. Wait another year. Doesn't mean it can't happen at RFK, but I think the likelihood of them staying in Maryland becomes greater, becomes more significant in that. All right, coming up, it was 45 years ago today that the day dawned with Washington essentially in the playoffs, but developments occurred which caused a winner-take-all game against the Cowboys in Dallas, which they seemed to have firmly in hand, up 13 points with 4 minutes to go. And the way they lost was a gut punch among gut punches. And we'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Bram Weinstein coming up at 11 o'clock. He did yesterday's game in New Orleans, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of thoughts on where this team is heading down the home stretch as they got 3 games to go, playing Philadelphia at home on Sunday as 3.5-point underdogs. They got Atlanta and Dallas still to go after that, and we don't know even the days that those games are going to be played. It's either the 28th or the 29th for Atlanta here. I guess if Atlanta wins tonight, there's a pretty good chance that'll be a Sunday night game. And then they play at Dallas to end the season. I think the way things are going, it's quite possible it'll be a usual 1 o'clock start or maybe a 4 o'clock start in Dallas on a Sunday. But you never know. But a lot still up in the air. But with 9 wins and winning one of the last 3, I think they are firmly in the playoffs. And I'm looking back at this day in 1979 and thinking just how crazy the day unfolded for the Washington Redskins. They go into the day in pretty good shape. They're playing at Dallas, and yes, it's a chance to win the division, but even if they lose, there's an excellent chance they get into the playoffs because as long as the St. Louis Cardinals don't get completely embarrassed by the Chicago Bears, that they will get in as a wild card. Going into that last day, Washington had a 33-point margin in terms of total points, and that was a tiebreaker that it came down to. So if it, I think the number was 28. If St. Louis lost by 28 or less, that they would allow the Washington to get in the playoffs, and the Bears would be out. The Bears won the game 42-6. St. Louis, which was a division opponent at the time, laid down like dogs, and that was in the 1 o'clock window. So by the time they got to the 4 o'clock game, Cowboys-Redskins, this was a winner-take-all game. That Washington, if they won the game, they would win the division and be in the playoffs, and if they lost the game, they were out, completely out, despite having only 6 losses, a 10-6 record, and they would be out of the playoffs. And things were going along okay. They took a 13-point lead late in the fourth quarter as John Riggins had the longest run of his career, a 66-yard touchdown run. And I've talked to Riggins about this. He said it's the only time in his entire career, he played 14 years in the NFL, it's the only time he had a celebration with the football after scoring a touchdown. Even the most famous play, the greatest play in Redskins history, when he scored that 43-yard touchdown to cement the victory over the Miami Dolphins in Super Bowl 17. He casually tossed the ball to the referee, as he always did, after scoring a touchdown. But that one, the 66-yarder, which put him up by 13 points in the fourth quarter, he thought was sending them to the playoffs with a chance to get to the Super Bowl. At that point, he played with the Jets for, 7 years, 6 years, something like that. Then he winds up in Washington on teams that come up short. He's with them in 76 and 77, 78. They start off the year 6-0, but they miss the playoffs at 8-8. And now is the year, 1979, and they're going to go. But he left too much time left on the clock for Roger Staubach playing his last regular season game. And Staubach is able to cut the lead to 34-28 on a 26-yard touchdown pass to Ron Springs. His son, Sean Springs, later played for the Redskins. And then, because of a turnover, the Cowboys get the ball back. And I remember hearing this as it happened. I was in San Antonio, Texas. I was working the board at KONO Radio, which was an affiliate of the Cowboys Network. And at that time, Brad Sham was the color guy, but Vern Lundquist, who was the main play-by-play voice, was starting to get network opportunities. And Vern wasn't available that day, so Brad Sham moved up from color to play-by-play, which is the job he holds to this day. Brad is in his 70s, still doing it. But on this day in 79, he had Charlie Waters filling in as the color guy. Waters was still an active player for the Cowboys. And he had a knee injury, so he was out for the season, and he got the assignment to work in the booth with Brad, and this is how he called what turned out to be the dagger for Washington.
You got to love them. I mean, you got to love the Cowboys. They're the most exciting team in the NFL. They can pull it out.
42 seconds left in the game. Redskins lead by 6. How can you live like this, doing this every week?
This is what it's all about.
This is a killer. 2nd down and 8. From the 8-yard line. No shotgun this time. Staubach throwing in the end zone. Tony Hill! Touchdown! Tony Hill! Oh, the stadium goes wild! Charlie Waters goes wild!
35-34 with the extra point. Now, that's the way most people remember the game ending. But you heard Brad say 42 seconds left on the clock. So there was still time left to play, and Washington had 2 timeouts left. So there was an opportunity to get the ball close enough for Mark Mosley to kick a field goal and win the game. And they have trouble getting it down the field. There's an incompletion, But finally, it comes down to 5 seconds left on the clock with 2 timeouts in their pocket. And this was the TV call. I couldn't find the radio call of Sham and Waters. But this was the gold standard for play-by-play at the time. It was the CBS crew, and it was Pat Summerall and the former Eagle. I forget his name, but anyway, this pre-Madden, and Madden was still coaching then. This is how they called the final seconds of the game, and if you watch the video, you will see that clearly Washington had time left on the clock trying to call a timeout. They didn't get it called. There's no instant replay. And this is how the season came to a crashing end.
Mosley with his wild bunch towel tucked into his pants. Theismann is his holder. Theismann is his leader, and he's the quarterback at the moment.
Mosley has made a field goal from the 53-yard line.
That's his longest of this year. Theismann throws. He's got at the 41. Game is over. Game is over. They used the 5 seconds. The game is over. Completed pass. Wait a minute. The scoreboard clock says the game is over. It may not be. They may have 1 second left to play.
There are a lot of people down walking around on the field that are not players.
The argument still goes on. The scoreboard clock showed that the game was over, and it is. Dallas 35.
That's Tom Brookshire with Pat Summerall calling in. Now, if you watch this on YouTube, and it's up on YouTube, you can clearly see that there's time left on the clock, and the referee, whose name is Bob Frederick, does not signal for timeout, even though Joe Theismann, who is a team captain, according to league rules, only captains can call timeouts. Theismann's trying to get his attention, and he doesn't get it, and time runs out. It's not reviewable. There's no instant replay in those days. And Theismann said after the game, I turned to Frederick, saw 1 second, but he made the decision. He told me to get out of his face. So they wind up with the devastating loss. Harvey Martin, who was a defensive end for the Cowboys and had been, I believe, the year before, had been co-MVP with Randy White of the Super Bowl. He took a wreath and he threw it in the Redskins locker room. Now, he thought the Redskins had put the funeral wreath in their locker room. Turns out it was a Cowboy fan trying to fire him up and said it came from the Redskins, but he threw the wreath in there to make it worse. And, you know, the epilogue to this is almost as interesting as the way the game played out. Riggins did all he could. 2 touchdowns, 151 yards rushing, including the 66-yarder, which he thought had locked up the game. And that team finished 10-6 and out of the playoffs. They did not get a chance to attempt what would have been a 59-yard field goal by Mosley. Now, Mosley insists that he would have made the field goal, and maybe he would have indoors, but they did not get the chance to do that. The timeout was not recognized, so the season ends like that. The following year, Riggins said he was so devastated by that and thought, God, I'll never get an opportunity to make a run at the Super Bowl. He also got in a contract dispute. He sat out the entire 1980 season with this contract. They put him on the reserve retired list. The team finished 6-8. Jack Pardee was fired. Joe Gibbs was hired. One of the first things that Gibbs did was talk Riggins into coming out of retirement, and the rest, as they say, is history. But here's the part of this that gets to be curious about what would have happened had the Redskins won the game. Had they been able to preserve the 13-point lead in the fourth quarter and close it out and win the division and, I guess, host a playoff game, they would have hosted the Rams. And the following week, the Rams actually upset the Cowboys. As Roger Staubach's last game, the Rams won. They might have been able to beat them, get to the Super Bowl that year because the Rams did. The Rams were the ones that played the Steelers in that Super Bowl. And if they get to the Super Bowl, Jack Pardee probably isn't fired. Riggins doesn't retire. And Joe Gibbs never gets here. And it's just, so crazy how that all worked out. And I guess in the long run, losing this game might have been beneficial because Jack Pardee does not have the same success. Jack Pardee did not get along with Bobby Beathard. Beathard wanted to get rid of him. He wanted an offensive coach. Pardee was an old-school defensive guy, even though later in his career he had some wild-scoring offensive teams at the University of Houston with Andre Ware. But yeah, I mean, you think about that. Had they won this game, the whole Camelot era of the 1980s may not have happened. So I guess you could say all's well that ends well. But on this day in 1979, it ended in bitter defeat. And anybody who was of age to be, I guess you'd have to be probably 55 or older, right? You'd have to be almost retirement age to remember this. But as I ran the board at KONO Radio in San Antonio, listening to Charlie Waters say, you got to believe, it was a devastating day. Anyway, we're going to get Dan Quinn's news conference today. Got the follow-up after watching the tape of yesterday. He already got an answer on why the clock was stopped with 9 seconds to go briefly. And fortunately, they escaped with a win, and he will not have anything to send to the league. But the explanation from the officials were, yeah, clock shouldn't have stopped, but not reviewable. Move on. Nothing to see here. That's that. All right, so we'll have the recap of that tomorrow and other things. Bram is coming up next, and I'll see you right back here at 9 a.m.